The New Testament writers universally claim that Jesus rose from the dead, and they report that he was seen by numerous eyewitnesses. Not only so, but history tells us that some of these same eyewitnesses subsequently died for their faith. They were that sure that Jesus rose from the dead. Was it likely they made the story up? Well, not if they were willing to die for it. As the saying goes, you don't die for a lie. But maybe they were self-deceived. Maybe they really believed they saw Jesus rise from the dead, but they were suffering from cognitive dissonance, causing them to go into intense denial. That's what some theologians and psychologists have suggested. They claim that the followers of Jesus, or as he was known to them, Yeshua, were so sure that he was the Messiah that they couldn't believe he stayed in the grave. Surely, they thought to themselves, he'll conquer death. Surely, he'll rise again. Surely, he'll fulfill his mission. And so, because their beliefs were so strong and the pain of his death so real and unbearable, they hallucinated his resurrection from the dead. They weren't lying, they were deceived. Now, other scholars have pointed out that there are very few accounts of mass hallucination of a resurrection. In fact, there's nothing in recorded history that equals what's recorded in the New Testament. Not only so, but to the embarrassment of these first followers of Jesus, the very men who had become the leaders of this new movement, the New Testament does not paint them in the most flattering terms. It says they resisted all talk of Jesus dying on the cross. They tried to stop the soldiers who took him to be crucified. Peter chopped off one of the men's ears. And when Jesus was being killed, they fled in fear for their own lives. And then, once he died, they went into hiding with the doors locked, thinking they might be next. They were anything but hopeful. Instead, they were depressed. And when some of Yeshua's female followers claimed that they went to his tomb, but he wasn't there, the men didn't believe them. They were utterly shocked by his resurrection. They didn't see it coming at all. And that means that the cognitive dissonance theory breaks down. The resurrection was the opposite of what they were expecting. But we now have a modern-day test case by which we can evaluate the New Testament claims, and it's a very close parallel in many ways. In 1994, a famous rabbi named Menachem Mendel Schneerson died at the age of 92. He was so revered by his followers that they began to proclaim that he was the Messiah. And then, towards the end of his life, when he was rendered mute by 2 strokes, they waited anxiously for his miraculous healing and resurrection. The Messiah, or Mashiach as they called him, is about to be revealed. Instead, he died. But not all of his followers were grieving. Some were actually dancing in the streets, sure that he would rise. After all, he was the Messiah. And after he was buried, some kept vigil at his grave, waiting for his resurrection. But it never happened. They were waiting for it. They expected it. They believed that at any moment he would rise from the dead. But he didn't. And to this day, none of his followers, who number in the multiplied tens of thousands, claim to have seen him in the flesh after he died. None of them had a meal with him. None of them touched him physically. None of them talked with him face to face. It's the exact opposite of what's recorded in the New Testament account, where the disciples, depressed and hopeless, sure that it was over, were totally shocked by Yeshua's resurrection. Not only so, but the New Testament records that his followers met with him for several weeks, even having meals together, and that he appeared to 500 followers at once. Why then didn't the same thing happen with the followers of Rabbi Schneerson, known as the Rebbe? Why didn't they imagine it too? What makes this all the more interesting is that to this day, many of the Rebbe's followers still claim that he's the Messiah. They say his death was a test for our physical eyes, or that he's spiritually present with us, or that if you check his tomb, he isn't there. Yet, to repeat, none of them claim to have met him physically, risen from the dead and alive again. In fact, on their calendars, they do not even record the day of his death. They are still in denial about it. In sharp contrast, those first followers of Jesus strongly emphasized the reality of his death, crucified like the lowest criminal, no less. Then they stated that he also rose from the dead, and they were eyewitnesses. Were they suffering from cognitive dissonance? Did they deceive themselves into imagining this? Centuries of psychological data, coupled with new evidence from the followers of Rabbi Schneerson, provide a simple and clear answer. Absolutely not.